What's up, everyone? Justin Freeman here, co-founder at Run the Sims. I want to hop on and give everyone a chance to ask any questions they might have about the SimRunner and SimRunner Pro. We've done a lot of work over this summer to try to make this product so much better than it was, and it was a pretty good product to start with. And so I'm pretty excited to go over some of those updates. We've done some tutorials, so obviously hop down through this channel. You can find those tutorials pretty easily if you haven't already checked those out. In the meantime, appreciate everybody hopping in, and we can what we'll do is we'll sort of like walk through the product again. I'll sort of start with like maybe sort of setting the table in terms of like what I think this tool does, what I think it does not do, understanding sort of the constraints that it operates under, and like I guess I'll just sort of maybe preface it by saying this, like the SimRunner and SimRunner Pro, it is a tool. It is a tool that is designed to do a certain type of thing. It's an algorithm. It's a machine. It has inputs, and understanding what the machine has been told to do is what I think is going to be key towards sort of unlocking sort of the opportunity here. So with that said, I'll hop on in and get this going. Forgive me, I'm a little rusty. I've never been in the live stream game, so happy to hop on and try to figure this thing out in real time. If you do have comments, I believe I should be able to see those, and I can probably toss those on the screens if you have particular questions. Let me start by saying, like, what's the difference between the SimRunner and SimRunner Pro? Well, quite simply, SimRunner Pro does everything that SimRunner does, RTS SimRunner, but also then adds the contest simulations on top of that. So as you can see, it's the same user interface that we are accustomed to, where you have these different games that you can select from. We have the classic slate selected currently, where you can go in and sort of drill down into any of these games, get to both of the teams that are participating, and modify these projections however you see fit. One question that we get a lot is like, hey, can I just like upload my own projections? Maybe you really love the projections at some other site. Can I upload those and run sims on those? And the answer, unfortunately, currently is no. And the reason why the answer is no is because we don't exactly simulate things the same way that a lot of other places do. We don't simulate based on fantasy score and create a distribution on that score. We actually start at a play level and build up all the plays of a game and repeat that thousands of times. And so to be able to simulate on a play level, I can't compute that with fantasy points as like the input. You have to actually input all of these different stats. Like you see here for Ryan Tannehill, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stats that are necessary to knowing Ryan Tannehill's projection, in addition to 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess, four stats that are also related to his projection on a team level. And so that's just for Ryan Tannehill, right? So the number of inputs gets quite large quite quickly. And then there's other inputs that are happening behind the scenes that are not editable by users. All that to say, like there is there's a lot of opportunity to add those data points. Appreciate that, Goblor. Yep. Happy to do this, guys. Hopefully, if you have questions, do drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of walk through what this thing does, how it works, like what it's being told to do, that sort of thing. So we mentioned it does not cover sort of uploading your own projections. You do have to sort of work within the system that we have laid out here. It's what feeds into our algorithm. It's what helps us understand, how to project out the games. So RTS SimRunner is going to project out the games. So in other words, it's going to run through this Tennessee Titans, New Orleans Saints game, however many thousand times we tell it to. And then SimRunner Pro is going to take that information and do more with it, run it through contest simulations. So SimRunner is going to take these simulations, and let's go through our settings here. There are some ways that we can modify what types of lineups we are getting. So how many sims do we want to run? This is a classic slate. We'll start off with a minimum of 1,000, but we can bump that up to all the way up to 10,000 if we want to. You'll notice we get a little icon up here. The more sims you run, the longer it takes. And if you have Pro enabled, it's going to take even longer. So we're designed to try to like do all of these things in less than 2 minutes. So if we err on the lower side, that's usually not a problem. If I turn Pro off, that's really not going to be a problem. So why don't we do 1,000 sims here? And, you know, honestly, guys, I wouldn't touch this stuff down here. These are different tools to get sort of like advanced level players closer to the types of lineups you would expect to see in your contest. So these are tools to use to your advantage. And then also like you can force in stacks as well. The more constraints you add, the tougher it is for the optimizing portion of this thing to work. So just keep that in mind. You will have to sacrifice number of sims to a certain degree to really crunch down on global stacks. So, and then once we do that, so why don't we go ahead and run this? So 1,000 sims, pretty easy, right? So we'll just hit the launch button right there. We do have Pro mode turned on. So, but before I get to the Pro mode stuff, let me actually, I'll let it finish. Should take it just a few seconds. There we go. Let's go to our optimal results. Because anything under this SimRunner Pro tab, you're going to need the Pro level subscription to see it. All right, optimal results. So this is where you actually compare your optimal results to projected ownership. And so we finally actually have ownership starting to trickle in for this week. And you get a sense of where players might be a little overowned, might be a little underowned. You can download all of this stuff to CSV. And of course, we're talking strictly main slates right now. So here, Justin Jefferson has a 15% projected ownership. We have him optimal 18.4% of the time. That's good leverage, you know, and we can argue about sort of how to define leverage. Here in this particular column, though, it's optimal rate minus projected ownership. So that's how you can use that column there. So you might want to scan up and down, say, well, Jefferson looks like he might be a smidge underowned based on current projected. Ramondre looks like he's a little underowned. Let me look for a negative. Tyreek Hill might be a little overowned. Like we only like him optimal 11% of the time. My guess is Simulator looks at Tyreek at 8,200 and Jefferson at 8,800 and says, I'll take Jefferson. Thank you very much. And yeah, so you can kind of go through that. And this gives you sort of player level analysis for the slate. Who's overowned, who's underowned. Next, your custom lineups. So in previous years, we did not have this for main slates. We do have it for main slates now. This is, let me actually stretch my screen a little bit. Hopefully this doesn't screw anything up. Now it makes it kind of small for you guys, doesn't it? Okay, let me kind of go back to where it was. Where is it? About right there. So, okay. So yeah, so here are the lineups that it created. It created this lineup. Justin Herbert, Javonte Williams, Rachaad White, Chris Godwin, Chris Olave, Debo, Chig, Metcalf, Colts. This is a pretty uncorrelated lineup, right? That happens sometimes. And, you know, one thing to keep in mind is the way we have this currently sorted. The sorting mechanism here is by sort of projected total. So what we've done is let me actually zoom out a little bit here. We just ran 1,000 simulations. We asked it to find the optimal lineup in each of those 1,000 simulations. We now have 1,000 lineups. So if I hit download right here, get that download button, I would now have access to all 1,000 simulations. I could play with those, do whatever I want to with that. But now once we have them, how do we want to present that to you? We've just simply sorted that by baseline total here in the Your Custom Lineup section. We'll get to how we make that a lot better in Pro. And then lastly, and there is some opportunity here to make some small tweaks to your lineups. You can get rid of different things in the flex. Like you just say, I'm not a tight end in the flex guy. Please get those out of my lineups. No worries. You can unhighlight those. And you see that there are no tight end flex lineups remaining. Maybe you're like, gotta have 4 wide receivers, you know, then you would just simply unhighlight running backs and tight ends, And now we're guaranteed to have a wide receiver there in the flex. You can look for certain players, like I want to only play lineups that contain Sam Howell, big Sam Howell guy. This is his week. Now I'm down to Sam Howell lineups that contain wide receivers in the flex. Yeah, and you can do different things with max product ownership. Let me scroll over here to make sure you see this. You can kind of see the different ownership levels and that sort of thing. Okay, let me stop and answer some questions. Is ownership being randomized each run, as in each contest sim run? Good question. The answer is it. Let me see. Does it depend? Yeah, for Showdown, it'll depend. Here's how it works. We get our projected ownership from a third party. We get those only for like the big classic slates. We get those for your DraftKings main slate, FanDuel main slate, and I believe that's it for classic slates. And so when we get those will be the ownerships you see every time. When we don't have those, we default to our optimal rate, because our optimal rate is actually a pretty good proxy for ownership. Usually that's only, going to be off by a few percentage points in one way or the other. So when we have ownership, that's what you'll see, and it'll be constant. When we don't have ownership, we will use our optimal rates. And so if you've been playing with it up to this point, we just got the first batch of ownership in for this slate. So if you've been playing with it up to this point, you will have seen that the ownership was basically looking, or the optimal rate would have been very, very similar to the ownership projection because it was pulling off the same data, simulating off the same data. And in Showdown, same thing. We use, if we have projected ownership from our data source, we will present that. If we don't, we default to whatever you just ran in your contest as being the ownership projection. Obviously, it doesn't give you an opportunity to make decisions based on leverage, but it does give you a ownership prediction and helps you contract like product ownership and that sort of thing. Let's see. Would you say there's any benefit to up and get to more than 1,000? Yes, absolutely. I'll go into that a bit more as we go into SimRunnerPro and talk about some of the pros and cons with that. So let me circle back to that. And did you say we can do stuff with product ownership? Yes. Although, let me make sure I'm being correct. Let's see. Max product ownership, 500. Okay. I have a feeling this is going to be a bug for us, because this should say max sum ownership. Good question, Peter. That's something we got to fix. Cool. Showdown slates, that's an easy one to type in. Okay. Awesome. I think that covers us for the regular SimRunner. So now you've got 1,000 lineups that have been created. You can pick and choose which ones you like. We've got some filter tools to help make that a little bit easier. We got more filter tools on the way. So hopeful to get that up. I know some of you have asked for like essentially stacking formats and that sort of thing. We'll get that in there for sure. And then lastly, let me touch on your projections. So this is with the traditional product. You can get fantasy point projections for every single one of your players. You can see all of their statistical numbers. So obviously you see like Justin Herbert's grading out super well there, 312 passing yards. Maybe he's coming in a little hot. Maybe we need to look at their that total there from the Chargers game. Joe Burrow, 328. That makes me want to kind of go back and look at, the pace number. And so maybe we'll go in and take a look at some of those things. But yeah, every single one of these numbers here is coming straight from your projections. Now let's flip over to SimRunnerPro. So we've already run these 1,000 simulations, and SimRunnerPro was turned on, so it's going to do all of these things. It's going to first, let's kind of go through these settings. We have the opportunity to tell it what type of field we're playing in, whether it's an extremely large field, sort of like a traditional large field, which is like 5,000 roughly entrants, or a medium-sized field, 1,000 entrants. If we're playing like super small field, I don't think Sims currently has a great answer to medium-sized fields, so I would not small size fields. So I would not try to use simulation for that because it's going to depend so much on what the lineups look like in that contest. Whereas I feel like our current methodology actually does kind of reflect the types of lineups you see in tournaments. So next, decisions you can make. We'll go over this a bit more in future sessions. I'm sure the only options that you can select are currently locked in already, but they're worth hitting on because it helps you understand how the sausage is made. Let me go back to payout structure here. So in these extremely large field contests, there's an extraordinary percentage of the prize pool that's going to first place precisely. There's a significant drop off down to second, a significant drop off from there down to third. And of course, it looks like a curve, right? With a being extraordinarily high and first place. And then by the time you get to say like 20th place, it's almost nothing, right? Like you're not that much better than min cash. So that's the way these things look. Now for these medium fields, you get a much flatter payout. So just trying to base this on the types of contests that you're paying in, because what we're going to do is take all those lineups that we just generated and put them in a contest against each other with these different types of payout structures, right? Whichever one you choose. And then this smoothing in 0.1% increments is kind of what I want to focus on now, because, you know, we talked about like if you're playing the Millie Maker, it has $1 million to first place, and let's just say 100 grand a second and maybe 50 grand a third. Like that's a 10% of the first place prize is what second place is. So we don't have enough simulation firepower to give you a really zeroed in answer. Like you would need to run, you know, I'm just guessing here, 100,000 sims, 1 million sims, 10 million sims to be able to like really nail where a lineup would fit in each one of the specific spots that are available for payouts. So what we do is we bucket these into 0.1% increments. So let's just say we just did 1,000 lineups, which the math ends up being pretty easy here. 1,000 lineups, 0.1% of 1,000 is 1, right? So there's actually no math to be done here. We actually are going to pay out exactly the way it would pay out in a 1,000 person contest. Now, let's just say we're running 10,000 sims. Well, how many lineups are in the top 0.1% then? Well, the answer is 10, right? So now any lineup that finishes in the top 10, we treat as exactly the same, knowing that with a little bit of variance here or there, that lineup that finished 10th could have finished second or first and vice versa. It's basically how many shots on goal were you getting to finish in the top 0.1%. And that's powerful because it helps you sort of smooth out that distribution of payouts. And so we take in that example with 10,000 sims, we take those top 10 payouts in the way it would look if it were 10,000 player contest, average those all in together and say, well, that's what all 10 of those would have made in this particular contest. Like think about it like a 10-way dupe for each sort of 0.1% increment. Hope that makes sense. This is actually maybe the concept I wanted to drill home on the most because it makes a big difference. You know, it's basically we're looking at how many times a lineup finishes in the top 0.1% is going to be the biggest thing that swings whether a lineup's profitable or not. All right, let's look at plus EV players. And you will see, and I may make a slight tweak here, but you're going to see some random names over here in the plus EV player section. Because what's happening, well, basically, let me start a little bit further back. Plus EV players are players whose lineups that they participated in tended to be very highly paid out. Minus EV players who tend to be associated with negative EV lineups. So it's basically, what was the average EV of the lineup that player participated in? So Josh Weil, a tight end for Tennessee, probably appeared in one lineup out of the 1,000. I don't even know who Josh Weil is. That's on me. But He just so happened to be in one lineup, and it just so happened to also be a plus EV lineup. I'm guessing because of who else you could fit in there. So just happened to be in a good lineup through no credit of his own. The sample size is so small. So what I think I'll do in the future is actually add a like a frequency number here so that you can kind of filter out the sort of noise. But, you know, as you scroll down a little bit to maybe like the actual decent players here, Cortland Sutton, plus 9.06%. Marvin Mims, 11.7%. Loves those cheap Broncos. Javante, 8.58%. Cheap Bronco again. Burrow, positive EV player. Olave. So yeah, it's basically saying these players seem to be associated with profitable lineups. These players seem to be associated with unprofitable lineups. And you'll also notice that there's fewer players on the plus side than there are on the minus side. Why is that? Because of rake. So for a player to be plus EV, they have to overcome the rake. So, and the rake is something like 15%. 16% in super large field. Give you a sense of what you look for there. So let's just say we're looking for a particular player. Like maybe we want to see is Cam Akers plus EV or minus EV. So we just type in Cam Akers. See, he's right there on the borderline, slightly minus EV, but probably doing pretty well against the rake. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'll try to add some sort of filter to get the kind of garbage guys out of there. But hopefully this helps and is relatively self-explanatory. Maybe we could even add a position filter. Cool. And then this is sort of what it's all about is the, well, let me actually pull up this question. Can you make the plus EV features downloadable with CSV? That's a great request. Yeah, that could totally be done. We're at the point now where obviously season starts tomorrow. So the likelihood of getting some features up in time for week 1 is probably pretty slim. But hopefully we could get something like that up and going, you know, say by maybe week 3 or 4 or something like that. So we do have kind of a list starting to pile up. But I'd also say, guys, if you do have feature requests, like I'm trying to make this in the best way that I can see that makes sense. But obviously everyone has a little bit of a different take on it. So if you have features that you want added, just let me know. That's always super valuable input. Which leads us here to graded lineups. This here is what I'd consider to be like the best thing that the program can do. And again, you'll kind of see what's interesting about this is that the top 0.1% for all of these lineups is actually happening. This shows you how often it happens. So the top 0.1% happened exactly 0.1% of the times for all these lineups. Why is that? Well, because we made it, we made 1,000 lineups. So 1,000 lineups would all have reached the top 1 exactly 1 time. So it's just kind of a small sample size thing. But you can see sort of how frequently, and I guess I should also say, if we increase the number of sims, that would not be the case. It's just a weird anomaly of saying we happen to have 1,000 sims and we ran it through all of those. So yeah, I knew Gobbler. I understood exactly what was happening. I could anticipate that question coming for sure. EV. So this is maybe the other point I want to like drive home and make crystal clear. This EV calculation says, what if all these 1,000 lineups played against each other 1,000 times? What would happen? Well, this lineup, according to our calculations and our sims and the inputs that are a part of this, would be expected to return 39% on the buy-in. So if this was a $15 tournament with these 1,000 teams exactly as they are, with the sims we currently have, with the strengths and weaknesses of our current sim methodology already baked in, would return a net profit of 39.9%. So you would expect a net return of, you know, basically 40% times $15. So that's what, $6 to the good. So the problem is that this may not be representative of the field you're playing in, right? So I want to call that out as an inherent thing that this program does not do. We talked about you got to understand this is a program that's been designed to do a certain thing. What it's not doing currently is trying to build an exact replica of the contest that you're playing in. It's building a sample pool of candidate lineups that do tend to look a lot like a tournament team. If I can kind of, I am going to stretch the screen just a little bit, even if that does make it a little bit smaller, but I kind of want you to see here some of the things that it's doing. You can kind of see the salary figure down this column here. Salaries do tend to be right up against the $50,000 borderline. There you got a random one that leaves $1,200 on the table. There you can see the baseline projection for these lineups. They tend to be kind of in the 120s, which is kind of similar to what you'd expect there. You can kind of see the sum ownership as well. So yeah, all of that these are data points and they are downloadable. And you can see here you've got a Justin Herbert stack with Mike Williams as a part of that. You got this weird thing where you've got 3 Patriots. It's a little bit strange. I would not anticipate seeing that, especially unstacked without their quarterback. Obviously, we're paying up for Herbert and Williams here in this particular case. So why 3 Patriots? That's kind of a question for the simulator. But overall, I would say that it kind of these super cheap options really boost your floor. And that's kind of what you're seeing there. It's got a really strong in the money rate. Did I see you tell someone in Discord that if you set the line of rules before the initial sim are reflected in the pro, would that apply to how it builds the sample lineups? So actually you can control let's see here. You can control the build type actually right here with global stacks. So if I set it with a global stack of 1 quarterback, 1 wide receiver, and 1 tight end, for example, I could do that, click run the sims, and that should populate lineups that look exactly like that. We can create those settings on the front end, click run the sims, and get the types of lineups that we're looking for. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. I wanted to just show you what that looks like for the classic slate. So Paul asks, it seems like you would have to rerun for each payout structure. Is that correct? I would say you want to try to pick the payout structure that matches closest to the type of contest you intend to put the lineups in. So we want to find the lineup, find the contest we're playing in. And let's just say, we're playing in the, we're playing in the power sweep. Well, that's about 5,000 entrants. We would click the large field button. And I would say that the biggest thing that's different is the min cash payouts are one. In some of these tournaments, min cash payouts are something like 2x. In some tournaments, it's more like 1.5x, like you barely get your money back. And then also the significance of that first 0.1%. If you click on medium field, you're going to get something like 90 buy-ins, I think it is. I'm ballparking here, but I think it's something like 90 buy-ins to first 0.1%. And in the big one, you're going to get something like 300 and some odd buy-ins to the top 0.1%. And the reason I use buy-ins is think about it in terms of everything's kind of relative to how much you're sort of buying in here with. Each time you rerun the pro, it changes, but it still is working from the same initial sample set, just running new sims off that again. That's exactly right. Exactly right. 100%. Cool. This is this is specifically for classic slate. I guess I should also maybe just like what happens if I turn this up, and obviously it takes a little bit of time to run these, but I'm just going to turn it up to 2,000 sims. and let's just see what happens. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. Like I said, we've designed all these to take less than 2 minutes. Usually these are just a handful of seconds, but we'll give it a few seconds to run. And that's the reason we stop it at the number of sims that we currently do. Like we're really kind of butting up against that 2-minute timer on the high ends. And so, wow, here now all of a sudden, we're talking about lineups that have huge EVs. So this is where I really want to make super clear the idea that this is not the EV of you entering it into whatever tournament it is that you intend to enter it into. You shouldn't look at this and say, I'm going to turn my $15 into another, plus $30 on top of it every time I enter this lineup. That's not the case. I do look at it and kind of like the lineup quite a bit, but no, not the case. This is saying this is what happens when this lineup faces these lineups. Now there's and with the Run the Sims sort of patented simulation algorithm running it, which we try our best to make look like real NFL football. There's ways in which it doesn't. It's a machine. It has its weaknesses. So I just don't want anyone to walk away thinking this EV is a representation of how much printing you should do with the money. You know what I mean? Like I feel pretty confident in saying this sure looks like a plus EV lineup to me. But I don't want to say that that's a plus 216% expected value. So I hope that's clear. I just want to say that like 100 times because I don't want to mislead anybody into thinking they're paying for something they're different. That's different. Yeah, just picking another random lineup. This one here, 49,800. It's projected for 120 fantasy points. It averages 126 here in the Sims. And let's just look at some of its features. It finishes in the top 0.1%, exactly 0.5% of the time. So 5 times more often than it's supposed to, which is, obviously super strong. So it basically, we're saying how often is it a top 2 lineup? Because we're running 2,000 Sims here. It's a top 2 lineup 5 times out of 2,000. Excuse me. 5 times out of 2,000, right? And so how often is it in the top 1%? 2.4% of the time. How often does it cash? 35% of the time. So you'll see some of these actually have like super strong cash rates. Others have much stronger first place equity. So there's lots of different ways that a lineup can return expected value, at least here compared to this field. I think it's also helpful to like look at the terrible lineups. Like what's the worst lineup that happened to be an optimal this one time? Love it. This lineup here just happened to be optimal once. Jimmy Garoppolo with Austin Hooper and Hunter Renfrow. It spent $45,000 in salary. It just happened to be the nuts this one particular time. Like it's going to happen out of 2,000. There's going to be some bad ones. Nick Chubb probably went nuclear. Khalil Herbert had a good game where he dominated. Like it's just, this is a weird lineup. You would never play this lineup. And so a critic would say, well, then you shouldn't sim against this lineup. And maybe that's fair. I think maybe like if I envision like a 2.0 version of this, maybe you just take that field and keep deleting off the bad, like the bottom 10% over and over and over again, and see which ones float to the top. Let me put a disclaimer out there, Kyle. No playing that Garoppolo lineup. If I find that lineup duped in this contest, we're revoking privileges to the site. So, but it's helpful. Like we show all the lineups so that you can see what's being compared up against. And some of them are going to be trash lineups. But guess what? In large field tournaments, there's a lot of trash lineups. So just kind of keep that in mind. But yeah, so you could obviously go here. Like here's how I'd envision doing it. Like if you have a take on the slate, you could say maybe I'm a big DK Metcalf fan this week. And, I could just go in and say DK Metcalf, give me all the best positive EV lineups that include DK Metcalf. That might be something I want to do. And, you could add additional players into that. Maybe you want to say, I like DK Metcalf, but I really want to go 2 studs. Can I get DK Metcalf and Justin Jefferson? Justin, I guess it's either or there. So it's pulling either Metcalf or Jefferson in that particular scenario. Is that right? Yeah, it's doing either or. So, you can go through and play around with the different features there to filter out the lineups. Cool. I don't see any additional questions there for Classic. So I'm going to spin it on over to Showdown. Got another question coming in. If the inputs for selecting lineup rules were a little more dynamic, I bet you could get this to work for very small fields. Yeah, probably so. And I will say, once we, hopefully I can get back to this. In this area here, this exploitative, this is something we're working on currently, where what we want to do is create a subset of lineups that look like a projected ownership field that you can submit. So you'd be able to upload your ownership into this particular setting and create a contest size that looks like what you want to play against with the sort of, and basically we will try to find lineups that would look like what you've laid out there. And then run your lineup, run everything sort of against each other there. That would be, I'm really interested to see kind of what that looks like. Not up yet, but hopefully sometime in the middle of the season. That's going to be a bit more complex. Let's talk about the Showdown slate. So to get to Showdown, all you have to do is go to Showdown/single, click on the place where you want to play. And there you see Detroit, Kansas City. And so, you'll notice that only one game to choose from here, obviously. And we've got the Lions, we've got the Chiefs. You scroll down, everything sums up to 100%. You can go in, you can change anything you want to. Maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be the starting running back all of a sudden. All the things you've always been able to do in SimRunner, you can still do those things. And you can now control your number of sims. Like I said, last year we did 5,000 sims for Showdown. This year we do a minimum of 10,000 and a max of 50,000. So I'm gonna run. Let's do 20,000, and I'm gonna keep the pro turned on. So it's gonna be working. And while it's doing its thing, let me just kind of go back to the inputs and talk about what else you can see here. And these are going to be some of the biggest drivers that you can do to manipulate what you're getting here. First is points scored. So for each team, we're using the Vegas inputs for implied team totals. So if the Vegas total is 49 points and the Chiefs are 7 points favorites, then it goes in and I picked really hard numbers to divide into 2 odd numbers. That was stupid. If the total is 50 and the spread is 4, then it's going to be 26, 20, 27, 23. Is that right? There you go. So that's how implied total is determined. And then pace is the number of plays you're going to run. So point scored is a big way to determine how many touchdowns are going to be in this game. And pace is a good way to determine how many plays are going to be in the game. They're the 2 biggest ways you can swing the fantasy point projection. Rush rate, how many percentage of this is exclusively targeted throws and rush attempts. What percentage of those are rush attempts? Then rush touchdown ratio, what percentage of these points being scored over here come from rushing touchdowns versus passing touchdowns? And then lastly, some controls for your DST. So for Lions D, if I think they're actually better sack rate possibilities, then I can increase that. And of course, you can always reset by pushing any of these reset buttons pretty much anywhere. You'll also have ownership. So we actually do have ownership for this slate. I'm sure it's still constantly being revised. And you can see Jared Goff, flex ownership 24%, captain ownership 3%. And I know a big reason why that's not higher is because we are getting ownership still on Travis Kelce, who we project as out. So again, that's a third-party data source. Sometimes I wish we had done our own sometimes, but oh well. Live and let live. So should be able to go now to optimal results. So all right. So our stuff has finished running. And obviously you see, I spotted Jared Goff from a mile away. Total leverage on Jared Goff, 35%. That's obviously going to change quite a bit with Kelce out. And you won't even see Kelce on this list because he's not in the Sims. So yeah, first and foremost, like this is the sort of foundational chart to help understand who's over-owned, who's under-owned, where is a place where you could potentially make a stand and look at certain players who stand out. This is, again, anything that's in these tabs here is just RTS SimRunner. It's only once we get over here that we're in the Pro. So everything we're looking at right now is part of SimRunner. And then we can go to your custom lineups. And this is maybe like the area where we've made the biggest difference. Like, I think I might spend more time here than in SimRunnerPro for Showdown only. And here's kind of where I'm at with it. So we just ran what? 20,000 simulations. Okay. And now here's those 20,000 lineups returned for us. You can download those and you'll see all 20,000 lineups listed. 42 out of the 20,000, the best possible lineup we could have made was this one right here. Patrick Mahomes, Amon-Ra, Isaiah Pacheco, Jared Goff, Justin Watson, Sky Moore. It's all based on the inputs that we have given it. Garbage in, garbage out. So make sure you like those inputs. And this is like, this particular game is very much up in the air in terms of what those Chiefs targets could look like, and Lions targets for that matter. But you see here some different statistics. Sim average total means in the Sims, this is how many points it averaged. Baseline total is if you just took all of the sort of like baseline projections for all of these players and added them up, multiply the captain by 1.5. This is how many points it would come out for in an optimizer. Some ownership, if you add up all the ownership in product ownership, if you multiply all the product ownership, and you have your build type, which is how many Chiefs and how many Lions in this particular instance, and then predicted dupes. So how many dupes is this lineup going to have? And this one's currently coming in quite low because of the low projected ownership for Justin Watson. That's really it. And these are that's going to be incorrect here in a few more hours whenever the new ownership comes in without Kelce in it. So definitely keep that in mind as we're doing predicted dupes. At what point does the product own or the dupes scare you away from a lineup that projects really well? The predicted dupes is really going to be kind of my guiding light, I would say. So I am not, I'm not scared away. I guess I would say, like, I don't want to purposefully be playing lineups with predicted dupes over, say, like 15 or 10, unless I've got a really good reason to do that. I guess I should also say that the number of predicted dupes I would be willing to play depends greatly on how many lineups I have run. Because here's how this is working in the background. Again, this is a machine. Understand how the machine works. The predicted dupes is multiplying the ownership of all the players in this lineup together. It's then multiplying it by this number, the number of lineups that we've asked it for, 20,000 lineups. So it's saying per 20,000 lineups, we would predict this lineup to be duped 1.2 times. And again, this is I don't trust that number currently because the ownership is not accurate at the moment. There are some very big things in flux. So with that being the case, yeah, there's 1.2 dupes. You can play a lineup that gets the nuts 42 times out of 20,000. It'll be duped 1.2 times out of 20,000. If I told you that was all accurate, then this would be a slam dunk of a lineup, right? Like it's frequent more time, 40 times more often than it's duplicated. That would be phenomenal. Obviously, there's a weakness there with having bad projected ownership in there currently. So hopefully that's helpful. But predicted dupes is going to be kind of my guide stone. So here you can see this lineup here, 40.5 projected dupes per 20,000. Only optimal 31 times per 20,000. Not good enough. I would say that's like immediately a scratch it off the list type of lineup. That's a mega duped lineup that doesn't get there enough to pay off the number of dupes. So that's how I intend to use this. Then there's also the advanced filters. It gives you a really good way to like get the types of lineups that you want into the contest. So we already have these filters up here where you can specify which captains and flexes you like. You can also specify which captains and flexes you don't like and get those people out of there. You can also say that the frequency must be greater than or equal to some type of number. Like maybe like don't even show me lineups with a frequency less than 10. So I could put 10 right there, and I'd only get lineups that have 10 or more in the frequency column. Lineups must contain at least, blank players with a projected ownership less than blank. So maybe I want to say that the way I want to get unique this slate is by picking lineups that contain at least one player that's super unowned, like at least one player with projected ownership less than 5%. Now all of a sudden I've got basically just Justin Watson lineups, right? Or excuse me, no, I've got Justin Watson lineups, right? Yeah, cool. All right. What else have I got here? Okay. I control how many quarterbacks are in the lineup. Let me get that out of there so I'm good to go there. I can control how many people have bad fantasy point projections. I can control how many kickers and defenses are in the lineup. I can control which position I allow into the captain spot. I can force in lineups that contain 2 running backs from one team. I can pick up this one right here is pretty cool. Own slots with minority captain. If I hit require on that, nothing. Because I have lineup frequency must be greater than 10. Yeah, okay. Here's how that works. Check this out. I think it's cool. So on slots with minority captain, that means we're looking at 5 1s and 1 5s, where the 1 is the captain. How cool is that? So Amon-Ra is the captain, but no Goff anywhere to be found. Just Butker, Pacheco, McKinnon, Mahomes, Sky Moore. There's a unique lineup. You know what I mean? Like that's going to be that looks pretty cool to me. And yeah, here's another one. Pacheco is the only chief. Like they just run the ball on the ground, and that's the only way they score their points. But all the traditional Lions get there, right? So there's lots of different ways that we can play around with this. So your options on all of these drop downs are allow. That means it can happen, it cannot happen, doesn't matter. Do not allow, which means does not let it happen at all. Requirement means it must happen. At what point would you use graded lineups in the pro version over the custom lineup section, especially in large field contests? There seems to be so much more flexibility in the main version. Yeah, I agree. Well, maybe I don't agree. There seems to be so much more flexibility in the main version. Do you mean the traditional SimRunner, or do you mean on classic slates? There is a lot of flexibility there. Oh, one thing we are adding, everything you can do right here in this screen on your custom lineups, you'll soon enough be able to do on SimRunner Pro. Got it. Yes, thanks, Mark. You will very soon be able to do that on SimRunner Pro. So maybe not by Thursday night, but very, very soon. Because I noticed that as well. It's like, man, I could do all these things, but it would sure be nice to be able to do that in the SimRunner Pro. So yeah, that's how we can use this. Lots of additional options. But yes, for classic slates and showdown slates, soon enough, everything you see in terms of filters will be the same in SimRunner Pro and SimRunner. So obviously your projections, that's still exactly the same. You can kind of see how all these quarterbacks pan out, running backs, yada, yada, yada. You can pick and choose what you want to look at. What do the tight ends kind of look like for this week? You've got Noah Gray, you got Laporta, yada, yada. Okay, let's go to SimRunner Pro. So we ran how many lineups there? 20,000. Okay. Same stuff as before. Pick your payout structure. Remember, payout structures are the same. Settings are the same. Plus EV players, you can look and see, hey, Sky Moore looks like a positive play. Justin Ross is punting cash away. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, same. This is all based on what we fed into it. So it's like saying, don't play those guys. So keep that in mind. But graded lineups. Here's where I think it's important to also point out a key differentiator in Showdown and why maybe I might be spending more time in the SimRunner than the SimRunner Pro, specifically for until we get those filters added in the SimRunner Pro. Because here's what's happening. Remember, we talked about the 0.1% buckets. Okay. Every lineup goes into a 0.1% bucket to identify how much money it made or lost. You know, if it's in the 33rd.3 percentile, it lost 100%, right? 75-ish% of these lineups lose 100% of their buy-in, right? Every time. But in the 25% that represents the payout window, they're going to fall in these different payout buckets. So we calculate that all out. So how often does a lineup finish in the top 0.1%? Well, this one finishes in top 0.1%, 0.6% of the time. But here's the problem is that, let's see, how do you say this? When you are playing Showdown, there is a obvious benefit towards being unique in that you don't split the prize pool with a large number of people, but that when you actually get to first place or give yourself a chance to get to first place, you're drawing live for the overall top jackpot of $1 million or whatever that very large sum is, that 300 and some odd buy-ins on average. And when we are collecting things at the 0.1% level, here we've run 20,000 lineups. So we're treating all 20 of the best lineups in any particular contest exactly the same. And within that top 20 exists possibly one super unique lineup that won the contest. Maybe it finished in second. Who knows? But that super unique lineup is getting diluted by 19 other lineups that also happen to be there, some of which may also drag into another percentile if that number is large enough. So, sorry, this is kind of a complicated idea to try to articulate. Hopefully, I'm making a little bit of sense. But in our example here, 20 lineups at the very top of this contest are going to be treated exactly the same. So lineups that finished ranked 1st through 20th, exactly the same. And if the lineup that finished in 17th was a 200-way duplicated chop, then it's going to drag down that entire cohort to the following percentiles below it and sort of dilute the average. All that to say, this current methodology does not sufficiently reward those highly unduplicated lineups, that super low dupe lineups. Hopefully that makes sense. Sorry, that was maybe the toughest thing I've ever tried to articulate, but I want to put that out there to say that that's an inherent weakness specifically for Showdown. In main slate, it's not a problem. You don't have duplication. It's not a major concern in main slate. Don't have to worry about duping somebody else. Not usually. Maybe if everybody plays like a popular optimizer's optimal lineup, you'll get it. But for the most part, the numbers of combinations in a main slate are vast. That's why you can run our simulator as many times as you want to, and you'll rarely, if ever, get a frequency number larger than 1. You might get it on some small slates. But so just wanted to kind of point that out as a interesting principle. And I'm happy to follow up on some of these questions in Discord, but I wanted to lay that out there. So main principles. You have a SimRunner and SimRunnerPro. SimRunnerPro is a $600 per year premium add-on to SimRunner. It gives you these EV calculations, helps you grade your lineups in a super easy way. Soon enough, it'll have all the same filters that you have on SimRunner. And so it makes it super easy to try to weed out those types of bad lineups. And secondly, is the EV calculation does not mean how much money you're going to make, right? It's how much money this lineup would have made if this field represented the field of entries in that particular contest. And third, for Showdown specifically, where duplication is something to be avoided, do keep in mind that this particular methodology is not sufficiently rewarding the very low duped lineups, which is something you obviously want to be trying for. So keeping that all in mind, there's lots of awesome ways you can use this. I'm super excited to be using this myself. I'll give it this sort of like one more second to answer any more questions. Otherwise, I'm about to shut down shop here. Got another draft coming up here at 8:30. Another one after that at 10. So, yeah, this is just the start of this thing for me. Hopefully this makes sense. I say that was maybe one of the toughest things I've ever tried to explain theoretically, like a quantum physicist or something. So, Radfom, thank you, sir. Appreciate you guys hopping in here. Well, we know where the most replayed indicator in this video is going to be. Oh, gosh. I hate to even think, what did I say there? Me saying that you don't get to make as much money as it says you're going to. Awesome. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We're going to hop on out of here and close things down. If you have questions, hop in the Discord. If you're watching this for whatever reason for the first time, and you're not a Run the Sim subscriber, the Discord's free. So if you want to just kind of hop in and talk shop and talk ball, more than welcome to hop in. Go to runthesims.com/Discord and we can get you hooked on up. Other than that, see you guys soon. If this is helpful, let me know. We can do more of these in the future. Just trying to do our best to present what should be transparent information in the way we present this thing. So see you guys.